because I just want to say you may remember that this time last week we were talking about the extraordinary claims by US President Donald Trump, on Twitter of course, that Barack Obama had ordered a wiretap, these are his words, on Trump Tower. And there was me thinking that wiretaps went out with George Smiley. This is McCarthyism, he said. Is it legal for a sitting president to do so? He asked, concluding it was a new law, and later comparing it not to McCarthy but to Watergate, which was a little bit later. Since then, the White House has been pressed to provide evidence for this unprecedented claim. It hasn't, but it seems it was based on a report on a US website by the former Conservative MP, Louise Mensch. Now, she wrote that the FBI had been granted a warrant to intercept communication. She didn't talk about wiretaps between Trump's campaign and two Russian banks. Well, Louise Mensch joins us now from New York. Now, Louise Mensch, you claimed in early November that the FBI had secured a court warrant to monitor communications between Trump Tower in New York and two Russian banks. It's now 4 months later. Isn't it the case that nobody has yet proved the existence of this warrant?
First of all, forgive me, Andrew, one takes one's life in one's hands when it's you, but I'm going to have to correct your characterization of my reporting. It's very important, and I did not report that the FBI had a warrant to intercept anything or that Trump Tower was any part of it. What I reported was the FBI obtained a warrant targeted on all communications between two Russian banks and were therefore allowed to examine US persons in the context of their investigation, what the Americans call legally incidental collection. I certainly didn't report that the warrant was able to intercept or that it had a location basis, for example, Trump Tower. I just didn't report that. And the reason that that matters so much is because that I now believe that there may, based on the president's reaction, there may well be a wiretap at Trump Tower. If so, Donald Trump has just tweeted out evidence in an ongoing criminal case that neither I nor anybody else reported. And he's right about Watergate because he will have committed obstruction of justice directly from his Twitter account.
Okay, well, let me come back then. Thank you for clarifying that. But let me come back to what the question was. We have not yet got proof, evidence that this warrant exists, do we?
No, and you are most unlikely to get it because it would be a heinous crime for Donald Trump to reveal its existence. In America, they call it a GLOMAR response. I can neither confirm nor deny. That's what all American officials will have to say legally. So if you're looking for proof, you won't get it until and unless a court case is brought. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
All right.
The BBC validated this 2 months after me in their reporting by the journalist Paul Wood, and The Guardian, the journalist Julian Borger, also separately from his own sources, validated the existence of the warrant. And if you were in America, you'd know that CNN and others are reporting that the investigation is ongoing.
Okay, let me come on to the wider point. You believe, I think, the Trump campaign, including the president, were complicit with the Russians during the 2016 election campaign to such an extent that Mr. Trump should be impeached. What evidence do you have for that?
That's an absolutely enormous mound of evidence. We could start with him saying, hey, Russia, if you're listening, please release all of Hillary Clinton's emails.
That's not evidence.
As the BBC, well, I think it rather is, actually, especially if you look at some of the evidence that exists on Twitter and elsewhere of people talking directly to his social media manager, Dan Scavino, and telling him to do that before it happened. There's quite a bit out there. And the BBC itself reported that in April of last year, a 6-agency task force, not just for the FBI, right down to the Treasury Department, was looking at this. So I believe there is an enormous amount of evidence. And of course, there is the Steele dossier, which was included in an official report of the US intelligence community.
Right. You've also claimed
as an adjunct.
You've also, so just to be clear, we don't really have hard evidence yet whether this warrant exists. It may or it may not. There is some doubt about the evidence. There's lots of claims. Whether there's evidence about Mr. Trump and the Russians is another matter. And you've also claimed that President Putin had Andrew Breitbart murdered to pave the way for Steve Bannon. This was the man who founded the Breitbart website, to pave the way for Steve Bannon to play a key role in the Trump administration. You then said that Mr. Bannon is behind bomb threats to Jewish community centers. I mean, aren't you in danger of just peddling wild conspiracy theories?
No, first of all, I haven't. And no matter how many times people say this, it's not going to be true. I said on Twitter in a tweet, I believe that to be the case about the murder of Andrew Breitbart.
Well, that's what I just said.
But
you
it's not a
believe
piece
that
of... It's not... No,
you
no, I
believe
didn't.
President
No,
Putin
I
murdered
didn't.
him, don't you?
Andrew, I said I believe it. You said I reported it. Those are two completely different
Well, you
things.
put it out on
It's
Twitter,
a
you
mile,
said you
but
believed it, and you don't have a shred of evidence.
I do. And indeed, I made no. I made
What's
no
the
assertion.
evidence that
I said
Mr.
what I
Putin
believe.
murdered
There is
Mr.
a
Breitbart?
difference.
What's the evidence?
I said I believe it. I didn't say.
Look,
that
you
I
may
reported
believe
it.
believe there are fairies
Andrew,
at the bottom of your garden. It doesn't make it true.
I may indeed, and if I say so, then that's my belief. If I say I am reporting, as I did with the FISA warrant, that a FISA warrant exists, you may rest assured that I have a basis in fact for a report. A belief is just a belief.
So let
when
me just
I can
get the
sustain
working...
it, I will report upon
Sure.
it.
No, look, I know you're relatively new to journalism, so let me just get the rules right. If it's Twitter,
Andrew, jealousy
if it's
is, greed is not your
we-
colour, Andrew.
If it's Twitter, we don't believe it, but if it's on your website, we should believe it.
If I report something and I say this happened, then I'm making an assertion. If I describe a belief, I'm describing a belief. I know subtlety may be a little difficult for you, but this is
I just think that if you want to be a journalist,
belief.
if you want to be a journalist, beliefs have to be backed up with some evidence.
Really? What do you have a faith?
Well, it's not a matter of faith, or maybe in your case, that President
Is it?
Putin murdered Andrew Breitbart. Are you?
A belief and a report are two different things, and no matter how often you say that they are the same, they will never be the same.
You've said in today's Sunday Times here in London that you've turned into, I quote your words, that you're a temporary superpower, where you, quote, see things really clearly. I mean, have you become delusional?
No, I'm describing a biological basis for ADHD, which I have, which, as any of your viewers who are doctors will know, provides people with, unfortunately, a lot of scattered focus. They're very messy, absent-minded professors, but when they're interested in things and they have ADHD, they can have a condition called hyperfocus, which means that you concentrate very hard on a given subject and you can see patterns and connections. That's biological, and I don't resile from it for a moment.
All right, thank you for explaining that, Louise Mensch, for getting up early in New York. You are the first time ever I've interviewed a temporary superpower. Thank you for that.
You're so lucky. You're so
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen again either.
Please don't ask us to comment on that interview.
I will not ask you to comment on that. Viewers will make up their own minds on it. Let me come back to the rather more mundane world of Article 50. Stop giggling.